Poštovani gledatelji, dobar dan. Nalazimo se u Briselu u zgradi Europskog odbora regija. Riječ je o instituciji koja zastupa interese regija i lokalnih zajednica u Europskoj uniji. Kada se donosi neki zakon u Europskoj uniji, donositelji zakona, države članice, Europska komisija i Europski parlament trebaju se prethodno konzultirati sa Europskim odborom regija kako bi se osiguralo da zakoni ne idu na štetu lokalne zajednice. Europski odbor regija slavi 30. rođendan i upravo danas se sastala njegova komisija koja se bavi upravljanjem, koja se bavi građanstvom i također vanjskim poslovima. Danas razgovaramo sa izvjestiteljem te komisije, Stevenom Deronom iz Luksemburga. Steven, thank you very much for being with us today. This institution, European Committee of Regions, celebrates 30 years. I'm sure that we were kids when the institution was founded in 1994, but from the last year you're also a member of this institution. So how do you see the functioning of the institution, the previous work, and what we could expect in the future?
Well, indeed, I was a kid when this institution has been established. I think I was 4 years old, so that's for me personally, that's nice being in the 30s, and that the Committee of Region has now celebrates its 30 years birthday. So I think the first thing we have to say is happy birthday to the Committee of Region, and to congratulate it for the tremendous good work it was doing over these 30 years, because it demonstrated that the principle of subsidiarity is a powerful tool, and it makes sure that the policy making are not just being done in Brussels, or as sometimes refer to this ivory towers in Brussels, or you name it, but that's basically that the policy are taking into consideration the local and regional voices, and that's very important. Looking ahead or looking back is always easy, but looking to the future it's always more complicated, because we cannot tell the future. But what I expect the Committee of the Region to be in the future, it is to stay the strong voice it is to fight for climate justice, social equality, and to fight for strong, resilient democracy throughout Europe. And to make sure that all the local and regional voices are being heard in Brussels.
Yeah, you are representing Esperange commune in Luxembourg with approximately 16,000 people. So how to secure that the voice from, let's say, a relatively smaller place in Europe could be heard here in the European Union? Because sometimes we could hear that smaller places or places which are not close to Brussels can't be properly heard. So how to secure this?
Well, it's 17,400 and something. Yesterday the mayor gave us the newest data about inhabitants, but online somehow they say like 16,000. I'm like, I know there's more people there. But this is often being said, like, well, the small communities, what do you say? What are you doing in Brussels? But at the end of the day, giving what Esperange is, it has a very powerful voice, because it speaks for all the voices of the small communities throughout Europe. And it can show that within the European Union, as you say, size doesn't always matter. It's rather what matters, and what's the power in this European Union and in the Committee of Region is the cooperation and the diversity in that cooperation, so that a small voice is being heard and that it can also change something.
Today here in Brussels, it was a meeting of the Commission for Citizenship, Governance, and institutional and external action. It sounds so complicated maybe for the ordinary citizens, but how would you explain this body, into this institution? What is the task? Why does it form, and what is the purpose of it?
So what is the CIVEX Commission? I remember the first time I was here in Brussels, and then I drove back home to Luxembourg, because it's roughly 2 hours, 2.5 hours drive. I went in the evening, I met some friends, and I was like, oh guys, you know, today was the first time in the Committee of Region, and we had the CIVEX Commission. And they were like, Committee of Region, we heard that, but what is the CIVEX Commission? And I tried to explain them, but they didn't understand it. And I was like, maybe I need to explain them differently. And so I tried to explain in the way they would understand it in terms of picture. And so I put pen to paper in the bar and I wrote, and I quote here, that the CIVEX Commission is the beating heart of democracy, governance, and Europe's global outreach. It defends fundamental rights, champions local voices, and ensures that subsidiarity is always taken into consideration. In a nutshell, you could say that CIVEX is where local action meets global ambitions.
It looks kind of complex thing, but today you had a meeting. You made kind of conclusion, like the common ground. So what's the most important thing what you agreed today with your colleagues from other parts of Europe?
So today we spoke about the working document for the future opinion on the local and regional perspective in the implementation of the rule of law within the European Union. And so it was rather to feel the room, how do the other members of the Committee of Regions see the rule of law and what do they believe is very important. I can tell you what I think is very important, that this opinion would reflect, because when we speak about the rule of law, and there's also something very abstract, and people sometimes don't understand. Well, I heard rule of law in French, l'état de droit, but what does it actually mean? And so you need to try to boil it down to the very basics and fundamental what it entails. And at the end of the day, you know, it boils down to transparency. It boils down to fostering that people are engaged in the policy making, because like often you hear people, they say like, but wait, we don't care what you, no, it's not we don't care, but we don't understand what you're doing. So what is it all about? And so you have two options. Either you change your language so that they understand it, or you try to, maybe you should anyways always change your language, but get them on board so that they are getting interested. Because when people are getting interested, then they want to take part in it, and then they believe in it, and they think it's a great thing. And at the end of the day, rule of law and respect of rule of law is the best thing we can do.
Did all members agreed on that today? How was the mood in the room?
What I sensed is that, like members then congratulate me that I became the rapporteur for this rule of law opinion, and it is a very complex task. It was also not the easiest to find a good expert that would fit the position to assist me in drafting it, and that has the necessary knowledge to do so. All in all, what I said and the response to what I said was pretty positive. Obviously, sometimes not everyone can agree what you're saying, and it's now up to me to draft the document, or the opinion actually, and that opinion will be sent to the members, and afterwards they can comment on it and suggest also amendments. So let's see in which direction it goes.
And maybe so that people understand, and then opinion will go to other institutions here in the European Union. So what will be in the end with the opinion?
So basically that opinion which will then hopefully and eventually, I mean, it will be adopted in the CIVEX Commission, and then it will be presented to the plenary. And the plenary is being held the 2nd and the 3rd of April, unless I'm mistaken. And that will then present it to all the members of the Committee of Region. And then again, people can take the floor, talk about it, and say their opinion. The opinion itself would afterwards be sent to the European Parliament, and then other people can also get the regional and local insight of the rule of law and the respect of rule of law and how to implement it and how to keep it up to life.
So far you're since the last year in this position, and according to your knowledge and today's meeting, do you see any differences between when we're talking about the rule of law among the regions in different parts of European Union? Do you see any changes how maybe local and regional governments accept it? Or are there challenges there different? Do you see any differences geographically into the EU?
Well, obviously, I mean, let's take Luxembourg and Croatia. I think, well, the two countries are very different, but we're united in the same thing, which is the respect of rule of law. But since the rule of law, you have different pillars there. And let's say in Luxembourg, there might be more problems with, let's say, transparency. And in Croatia, might be something with the independence of justice might be at stake. I'm not saying this is the case. I mean, but despite that there might be differences, the challenge is the same, because the challenge is to protect the rule of law and to empower the rule of law so that everyone respects it, because it's going to be a better society for all of us if the rule of law is respected. But where do we start with respecting the rule of law? At the very local level. Any region in Croatia, any region in Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Sweden, you name it, they are all united in that task to protect the rule of law.
Yeah, you mentioned your home country, Luxembourg, which is one of the founding members of the EU, and also Croatia, the newest member state. But then do you see like the big difference so far in adopting rule of law?
I mean, while reading the European Commission rule of law of 2024, obviously there is differences there. But again, all the countries, they want to make sure that the rule of law is being respected, and then that the rules in the country reflect that will to respect the rule of law.
Mm-hmm. A part of rule of law, there is another aspect of this Commission, and this also enlargement of the European Union, which is again in the focus at the moment on different levels. So what is the task of the Commission in that field, and what the Commission is standing for in the enlargement?
Mm-hmm. Well, CIVEX is actively engaging with the Western Balkan, you know, to help them to prepare their integration within the European Union. And this goes by means of cross-border cooperation, sharing best practices in governance. And so this is what the CIVEX is doing. It's doing way more. And well, I have to say, I'm just there 1 year, so I'm like every time I'm coming to Brussels, I see, wow, there's so many things going on there, and this is much necessary. The CIVEX, ultimately speaking, believes that, well, enlargement, and we speak about enlargement, it's not just about, well, now the European Union is a little bit bigger, great, you know, like this is, that's not the point. Enlargement is more about the deepening of our commitments to fostering human rights, to fostering the respect of rule of law, transparent government, and citizen participation. And that's what the CIVEX also stands for, the CIVEX Commission, sorry.
Talking about the candidate countries like Western Balkan, is there any cooperation at the moment between regions of the candidate countries and the EU member states in the rule of law, let's say, and what kind of cooperation exists at the moment?
Well, I don't know all the cooperation that are right now being implemented, but there is a lot of dialogue. Is it at the higher level or even at the lower level, as the CIVEX Commission also is doing? And if you, for instance, read the rule of law report of the European Commission, you see they mention also this new, like the candidate countries, what could be done and what needs to be done, because at some point, you know, it is about getting prepared to integrate that European family, and that's, you know, it's a process. Takes time. Some people say it takes too much time. Other people say, yeah, well, that's the right enough time. But there's a lot of cooperation going on there, and that's also much necessary.
At the moment, it's also maybe crucial moment for the European Union. This week, the new European Commission should be elected, and so what do you expect in a next 5 years term? You're also a lawyer by training. Do you expect any institutional changes maybe in the next 5 years? And
well, if I would have
what to expect,
if I would have like this sort of magic bull in which I can look in to predict the future, would be great. But well, I expect there will be certainly a lot of discussion, because there's not many things, but there is things that might need to be adapted eventually. I mean, there's countries that say the unanimous approach in certain areas is outdated. Other countries say, well, this is much necessary, so especially the smaller countries will not be overridden by the big countries. But ultimately speaking, like what will necessarily change, that's up to the Commission then to decide, and to, well, also the national governments of these countries. But in any case, and this being said, I have, however, expectations to what the European Commission shall do and what shall be done within the European Union. And I just don't say this as a green, or I don't say this as a member of the Committee of Region, but I say this also as a citizen of the European Union. I believe that, I mean, we see the world, and we see also where it's going through and going to, you know, because of climate change. What I expect of the Commission is to take bolder steps when it comes to fighting climate change and to fight for climate justice, because that's in the future we will be confronted with it, and when we're not ready with it, and if we don't do enough, then in 5 years' time, maybe in 10 years' time, the future will tell. We need to deal with these problems, but we cannot deal with these problems, as said, in the future, but we need to deal with the problems now to be fit for future. It's very important.
Yeah, you're from the Green Party. At the moment there is a climate summit in Azerbaijan, COP. So how would you evaluate so far, if you see any conclusions of the summit and the role of the European Union?
Yeah, well, I'm happy and have, how should I say, on one side, in Luxembourgish you have this, I'm going to say it like this, but in Luxembourgish you have this expression, and I guess it exists in other languages too, but you cry with one side and you smile with the other side. Because, like, why do I smile? Well, obviously the climate crisis has been recognized, and it also, and going to these COPs, despite wherever it is being held, that's a completely other discussion. But it shows, okay, we need to do something, and we need to fight for climate change. I mean, fight to make a better future. But when I got informed of what has been decided there, then I was obviously not too happy, because the whole question of financing and who's going to help these countries that are the most affected by the climate change, that has not been resolved. And when I do hear that how many millions of euros which are still missing out on how to, you know, help these countries, when I hear this should come from maybe private investors, then I'm like, this is eventually not the right thing to do, because the countries that pollute the most should also contribute the most to, let's say, clean up the mess, basically.
Yeah, at the moment many regions are concerned about the weather conditions. We saw disastrous floods in Valencian region in Spain. So are you concerned about that this is something which could occur much more often, and that the regions and countries need a kind of common response on that?
Well, that phenomena in Spain, I mean, it was not an unknown phenomena. I mean, it's called gota fria, unless I'm mistaken, and I mean, they knew it. I mean, not they knew it, well, it is known to them, but it happens more currently, as in other places, you know, it's getting hotter and hotter. Or in Sweden, in south of Sweden, they can now produce wine, which, I mean, for them, you know, this is great if you can produce wine, but it tells something that climate is changing in Europe, and where we experience it, and obviously we need to adapt to it. And how to adapt to it is to adapt your cities, to make cities more climate resilient. And there must be the common European answer, is that we need to do more to fight climate change. Because if we don't do enough, then these phenomena might occur more often. And I mean, I'm not a specialist in this type of, in the field of law, so with insurance and damages, but every weather phenomena which gets out of hand, and they are getting more and more out of hand, it costs a lot of money. And it would be cheaper to invest, well, it also costs a lot of money, but to invest to make the cities climate resilient, then afterwards to clean up the mess and to repair everything. And
many regional and local governments also depend on the EU money, on the EU cohesion policy and in the EU funds in new countries like Croatia, but also Spain. Last month we heard here in Brussels some concern from the regional leaders because kind of a document was leaked, probably from the Commission, which said that in the new 5 years term, the central governments will have more power when it comes to EU funds, so that the central governments should comply with, that they should bring forward some reforms, and that would be condition even for regions and local governments to take EU funds. So what do you think about that, and how to secure that also that regions and local communities still have enough power when decide where to invest EU money?
So, me coming from a country where the communal autonomy is very important, I have a little bit my difficulties to hear that the central government has in the future should get more power to decide where to invest, because at the end of the day it's the local, regional and the local authorities that know best what is needed and how it is to be invested and where and when. So that these news are, well, I don't want to say they're not too inspiring to me, because now you need to wait until like what will actually be eventually decided, but you need to keep an eye on it, because at the end of the day the principle of subsidiarity and that the local regions know best what to do and how to do it, and I think that's very important.
And for the end, it was said that citizens in Europe in general, they have more trust in local governments than in national or even European politicians. You as a young politician, and how do you see the future of politics into the EU? We saw that in some countries during the European elections in June, the outturn was really low, like in my home country, Croatia was the lowest. So what should be done to so that citizens have trust again in politicians in Europe? Yeah,
I mean, in Luxembourg, I would say even it was also low too, but compared to Croatia, it was very high, because it was like 86%. But this, you need to bear in mind that voting is mandatory in Luxembourg, so there's a lot of people that didn't vote there too. And why so? Because I mean, even when I speak to my friends, like, when I spoke to them, are you going to vote? And they were like, yeah, but like, why should we vote for the European Union? Like, what are they actually doing, this European Parliament? So, I mean, I learned this in school. I mean, obviously I know what they're doing, but you learn this in Luxembourg in school. But at some point, people like they don't really like to connect the dots. Who is doing what? So it starts with education. I mean, or information, because people are at the end of the day educated, but it's more about information. But you said something which it is somehow I consider not funny, but like interesting, and is that, why do people might have more trust in their local and regional government than, for instance, the national government? Well, just speaking on my experience, if I walk down the street, somebody comes to me and is like, hey, Stephen, how's it going? You know, what is going on there and there? And then I can explain them, because you're not out of reach. You can just go there, or eventually you ring the bell and it's fine. But imagine afterwards you sit somewhere far away in the capital and you decide things which very often come across as being very abstract. It's less tangible for people, and the local politics, people understand it because it affects them differently, and I would also say more directly sometimes. And that's like why eventually the trust must be
yes, it's probably something more concrete for them, that you solve some real everyday problems for citizens.
And then you see them also more often. And then if you see someone or you talk to someone, then you can somehow create this relation of trust.
Is it possible to make similar thing on a broader level, to engage them?
Yeah, I mean, I believe always, but I mean, politicians are also just human being, and they, how should I say, we have 24 hours in a day, and they have a lot of things to take care of. And at the end of the day, I mean, everyone is doing what he can do best, and also giving everything he or she can. But I think it is very important to go to people, to talk to people, to be transparent, and to look for this dialogue, because that's what people want. It's dialogue to understand and to feel part of it. That's the very basics. Well, that's my opinion, obviously.
Yeah, nice. So let's finish with that message. So the dialogue is important between politicians who should be transparent, and also the citizens who should be more interested in politics. Mr. Daron, thank you very much for this interesting conversation.
Thank you for having me.
And good luck with your duties as a politician in Luxembourg, but also here in Brussels. Poštovani gledatelji, ovo je bilo sve za danas. Do idućeg puta i nekih novih evropskih razgovora, srdačan pozdrav.